I remember Brian very well. We became friends in 7th grade. My fond memories of Brian started out so innocently one day in class when we as raucous young men were showing our muscles to each other, boasting about who had the biggest and strongest muscles as we were becoming teenagers and were starting to become aware of our bodies. Brian and, let's just call him D, were really going at it with each other about whose muscles were the best. D had a lean and athletic physique. It was long and sinewy at the time. So when he flexed his long arms, his biceps became a hard, tight ball of steel. He was proud of his muscles, and I remember sneaking quick looks at it, wishing that I could touch it. All the while, Brian looked like he had been unimpressed, as if he had something to hide. He calmly raised his shirt and didn't say anything as he curled his arm upwards. I nearly jumped out of my seat when I saw his biceps. His biceps were so defined and developed that I saw indentations and veins deeply etched into them. He caught me looking at him and started pumping his arm up and down. As he did that, the indentation and veins became more pronounced, and from his forearm up to his shoulder, it looked like a machine pulsating with power. D quickly turned around and went back to doing his work as I continued to stare at Brian's muscles. The teacher told us to concentrate on our work, but Brian caught me sneaking glances at his still pulsating forearms for the rest of the period. And the thing about it is, he smiled at me every time he caught me looking at him. The next school year, me and Brian were in French class together. It was the last period of the day, and we sat next to each other in the back of the class. The teacher didn't care that we seemed to be sitting isolated because we did our work and we got good grades in the class. One day, about 30 minutes before the final bell rang, Brian started feeling his arm. I asked him if he had lifted weights. I had often thought about the muscle display frequently, especially when we talked to each other. He told me that he had been lifting weights for more than a year. He said, "Watch this." And then Brian started pumping his forearms and the veins started to look as if they were going to pop right out of his skin. His forearm veins became so huge and engorged with blood that he started moving them around with his other hand. He could literally pick up his pencil-sized veins and let them fall back down. He saw my enjoyment and amazement, and he started flexing his biceps. The indentations in his muscles were so etched and defined that I could see the muscle insertions as they became huge baseballs under his skin. He then told me to feel it. When I touched his muscles, I was amazed by how hard they were. To this day, I have to press down on something hard like marble to simulate how hard this boy's muscles were. I couldn't make an indentation in them no matter how hard I pressed down. He was just as pleased at how much I was enamored by his muscularity as I was to sit there and watch and feel his muscular power and superiority. The bell rang and we stayed behind for at least 15 minutes as he flexed his muscles into hard pulsating slabs and bumps of flesh and veins. He finally got up and said, "I have to go." As he walked out of the classroom, I was just sitting there in amazement. I couldn't believe what I had just saw. Me and Brian started sitting next to each other in every class that we had together through the years. It got to a point that he was flexing his muscles and making his veins pop out on almost a daily basis. I was in muscle heaven. When we would talk on the phone, Brian would tell me about his workouts. I remember one time when we talked on the phone, he told me that he was starting to notice muscles that he never knew he had. He told me that he would have to take off his shirt the next day to show me. We went into a bathroom stall the next day at lunch, and I literally hollered with excitement when I saw his whole body. His shoulders were like bowling balls, and they had striations in them. His chest was so pumped and big that his nipples pointed downwards to the floor from the heavy weight of the muscle. His arms looked every bit of the 17 inches that he had told me they were. And keep in mind, we were like young teenagers, and this guy had 17-inch arms already. His back had so many ridges of muscle in them that I couldn't help but run my hand over him in amazement when he turned around. He told me that his back muscles were the ones that had surprised him the night before. He flexed his traps and he told me to feel along the back of his neck. He told me that he didn't know he had muscles like this on the back of his neck, and I just felt them and I stared in amazement. His abdominal muscles were hard as bricks. It felt like he had a 2x4 piece of wood underneath his skin. He told me that he did at least 300 sit-ups every day. By this time, we were about in the 10th grade, so he was starting to look like a man. He had facial hair and everything. He told me as I was in a trance feeling his muscles that he had never met anyone who loved muscles as much as I did. And I told him that his physique had done this to me. He laughed and he flexed for another 5 minutes before he put his shirt on. For the rest of the day, I was in a daze as I thought about the full body muscle flexing that I had just been privileged to take part in. As muscular as he was a short guy. I now see that as why he was probably so determined to turn his body into a muscle machine. His short stature seemed to magnify how amazing his muscles were. After that day in the bathroom, he had started wearing tank tops a lot, and that made it even easier for him to flex his muscles for me. Even if we were taking a test, I would look up and he would make his pecs bounce under his shirt, or he would drop his pencil and flex his triceps and make his veins pulsate and bulge as he bent over to pick the pencil up. We even started meeting up with each other an hour before school started in the cafeteria, and I would feel his muscles as he flexed with no interruptions. We started buying and sharing bodybuilding books and magazines. After high school, we lost touch. I have searched endlessly for Brian throughout the years, and I tell this story with the secret hope that Brian somehow reads or hears this and realizes that his personal muscle and vein worshiper is still thinking about his awesome physique.